Theos is... No. All right, just to recap, I'm reading the poem on page 15, just like that. I don't even know what it is, and I'm gonna tell you why I called it what I called it. Dang, I hope it's a good title. When we look long at one another, we soften, we relent, listen, might forgive. We allow for silence. And when we see each other, are known. And in that moment, might change, though nothing has moved or been spoken. I named it When We Look because I was looking around the world and I noticed how rarely we look at each other, how we glance away so quickly, even at people that we love. And I started wondering what would happen if we looked in each other's eyes, despite the discomfort or the embarrassment, because I started looking at people in the eye and they were uncomfortable, deeply. And then I realized it's the only way. It's the way to listen. That we listen through looking. We listen through not looking away. And that everything might change. When I was in 3rd grade, I wanted to be in the class play. And you had to sign up for the part that you were going to audition for, and I really wanted to be Alice or the White Rabbit. But the music teacher startled me at the sign-ups, and I signed up for the wrong one. And I got this one-line part, and it was the Rosebud. And my one line was, I think she's pretty. And I gave that line my all. I had so much gusto. My mother was so upset because she had to make a costume. And how do you make a costume for a rosebud? So I wore this terrible sweatshirt with this red hood. It was like cinched down around my face, and these giant crepe paper leaves that were safety pinned to the sweatshirt. I think I looked like a nuclear radish. And I remember getting up there and saying that line, I think she's pretty. And I think accidentally that became my whole life's work, is telling the world how beautiful it is, despite all the voices that come around. So when I look at people, I think they're so beautiful, and I think they're so hurt. And they're so, sometimes just terribly, terribly hurt. And they don't see their own beauty or their own goodness, but it's there. I was not given a good impression of who I was as a child. My mother used to say, "Who do you think you are?" and she would poke me in the collarbone, and every poke was this thump. Who do you think you are? And then she would tell me I was a selfish, negative quitter. I was a difficult child. I ruined the family. I stopped looking at myself because I was so afraid that I would see who she saw. So I started avoiding mirrors. I got this image disorder, and I think I look like this combination of the Grinch and Gollum. Like, that's who I see if I look in a mirror. And it's so bad that even if like I have a teaspoon and I see it, and I see myself, you know, upside down, and I'm like, it's horrible, it's horrible. So this way of looking, I think I made this practice of looking at each other, at other people with kindness. But I have this long lesson to learn to look at myself. I hope that someday I could say it to myself and believe it. That I think she's pretty. It's the hope. What I keep in my pocket, usually, is a washer. Because a friend taught me that what we tend to look at in the world is what's missing, is the whole. And then when we look at what's missing or what's lacking, what we don't have, then we forget that there's this beautiful ring around it, that there's actually something solid that's supporting the lack. And she taught me that the world is literally sprinkled with washers. And if you go outside and you go on a walk, or you just go anywhere, you will find a washer. And I didn't believe her. And I walked her to her car, and I turned around and I came back up the sidewalk to my house, and buried in the dirt, half buried, was a tiny little washer. And I texted her and I said, "Did you put that there?" She said no. She swore no. And then I started going around, and they're everywhere. And they're this little shiny reminder of a way of looking. Because I do tend to think of the lack and the loss and the problems, or the fears, or the anxieties, or the stresses. And then I forget what's around it. And so it's become this wonderful treasure hunt. All our stories are in the end one story, one vast story about being human, being together, being here. Frederick Buechner. I love this quote because we live in this fractured time. We've never had the impression of being so connected, but so lonely. And people have lost each other. And I love this quote because we need to remember that we're human and how much we need each other. But it's work. It's this really hard, long work to be fully human. And I never would have believed how hard it was in my 20s. Like I just, no, it's just all about love and that's it. It's very dreamy. But if nothing human is alien to you, if you can actually look at that, then you are full of compassion. And that's the hope. That's the hope. I had a student who was from Singapore, and America was so strange to him. It was so hard. And we would have these long conversations. And one day, he leaned forward and he said, "What is the purpose of life?" And I was caught off guard, and I think I said it's just some pleasant nothing. Like, oh, that's a big question or something. And then I looked, and the intensity and the seriousness of his face just almost stopped my heart. And he said, when it comes time to die, how do you know you've lived a good life? And there was just this silence. I was 28 years old. I knew very, very little. I knew, luckily, that I knew very little. And I knew how much this question meant to him and to me. And I sort of reached around in my mind and I said, maybe you've led a good life if you've helped one person. And he said, just one? And I said, well, many would be good, but maybe just one is all you need. And I have never forgotten him, and I have never forgotten that moment. And he changed me. If you set about helping one person at a time, then you've done good. One morning, I was looking out the window when a great wildness came over me. I wanted to be kind to everything. I promised not to kill the spider on the wall. In the cold, I took the dog for the long walk she'd been wanting. I fetched a trash can lid for an ornery neighbor and did not, just then, add a single adjective to his name. I went back inside to the laundry and dishes with a clean heart such as I have never had. Before dinner, The wild goodness bellowed, "Too tame, too tame." So I went outside without my coat and shouted poems up the alleys until my children came home with their small, warm hands. Then we ate bread in the kitchen, unafraid to be happy. The stars in wild darkness were right over our heads.
Thanks for watching our film. Every story we've made is possible thanks to the support of our patrons. And if you'd like to continue to support us to make stories that explore the infinite beauty of being human, sign up on Patreon. Thanks.